Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. And also, don't forget, the John Keim Report is presented by AAA. And my friends at Huel are back. Got the salted caramel that's elevated. That's going up to the top of my list here, folks, alongside the chocolate and strawberry banana. Really enjoy it, but you know the deal. 40 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals. Go to huel.com, use the password Keim. New customers get 15% off their order. See the terms and conditions to make sure that it applies. So don't forget about that. Anyway, folks, by the way, I'm recording this on Thursday. We just watched the last practice for training camp. Last time we get the full practice for the media. And if you're waiting for the video, that'll be out Friday morning. So anyways, apologize for any delay, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So it'll be out Friday. The audio, of course, is what you're listening to now. There we go. Anyway, let's get some updates for the last practice and a couple of things we're going to start with: personnel updates, injuries, etc. So we did ask Dan Quinn for an update on Noah Brown. He said that he's been ascending, so I think they feel really good about him being ready for the season opener. Now, the question, of course, for Noah Brown is, will he stay healthy all season? That's always been the big key for him, but they do feel good about his progress, and they do feel good about his availability for the season opener. He was out there going, not in uniform today. They were in pads today. He was out there working with, during stretching and all that, going through stuff. So he's been doing stuff, but as Quinn said, the arrow is pointing up. So that's one thing. Terry McLaurin was out at practice today. First time we've seen him out there. Well, actually, it's not the first time. He was out there at the inter squad scrimmage a week ago, the burgundy and gold scrimmage, and he was out there again today. So Sam Cosmi was out there, another guy doing rehab. Noah Brown was out there, as I just mentioned, but McLaurin came out there after they got to the 11-on-11 portion and was on the sidelines the whole time, stayed there the whole time. So now you know. But no update in anything else with that situation, and no update on Brian Robinson. So we move on. And I will talk about the run game in a few minutes because I do think it has a chance to be pretty good this year for a variety of reasons. Marcus Mariota, he too was out in pads today. That's a good sign. Did not participate in the 11-on-11 work, but one thing he did say is afterwards is that he's been dealing with Achilles tendonitis. All we knew was it was a lower leg strain. That's all Dan Quinn had said. It's Achilles tendonitis, and the prescription was rest. So he feels really good. He said that it's not something that they feel will linger. So once you get through it, then you should be okay. And I think he feels pretty good. They feel pretty good about where he's headed. The question I have for his situation is, how does it impact the third quarterback spot? Because let's be honest, like Sam Hartman has not earned a spot on this 53-man roster. The question is, has Josh Johnson? I don't know about that either. He did not have a good finish to that game the other night, and he's got plenty of experience. We know what he can do. We've seen it over the years. But what does that mean for the third spot? Did he earn a spot on that 53? And is it impacted by how they might feel about Mariota's situation? Like if they feel like there's an injury, any concern at all, then you would keep a third quarterback on the 53. And then it's like, would you be willing to expose a Josh Johnson to other teams, like by cutting him? He doesn't have to go through waivers, but by cutting him, he could be free to sign with anybody. Would anybody put him on their roster, and would he be better than a third somewhere else or here? That's the stuff that we're going to be paying attention to, but I do think some of it is related to how Mariota feels. Now, in Atlanta, Dan Quinn typically kept two quarterbacks. So last year they kept three. You have a rookie, and then Mariota also at that time was dealing with an injury situation, so he wanted to. And I think it makes sense to try to keep three, but if you keep three quarterbacks, now you're keeping one fewer spot somewhere else where a guy might be able to contribute more than a third quarterback. But that third quarterback provides a lot of insurance. And by the way, with Mariota, one thing he has been doing is going through a lot of the walkthroughs. That's something he likes. I've told you before, it's something Cliff Kingsbury loves. And so there you go. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was wearing the black jersey just to signify no contact in practice today. He did have that shoulder dinged up in the first preseason game. I don't know why that was on today. I'm assuming it would probably be the same thing, but all I know is he had that on. Today was a lot of situational work. So that's one thing Dan Quinn said. Remember, this was supposed to be the joint practice day. And because it's not, they didn't have that. And I heard John Harbaugh talking about it. I know like these guys did not want to cancel it. But I also think it could be like Harbaugh said, this team is coming off a game Monday night, and then you have a game, a short week, and to have a joint practice and maybe practice the way they wanted to may have been difficult. Regardless, it didn't work. But these guys did a lot of situational work. It was actually a good, upbeat, fast-paced practice because of that. And it was fun to watch because it was more game-like situations. So it was scripted, but not really. So Dan Quinn was on the microphone. It was a little bit more unpredictable. So you might have a run that when you're watching the practice, it looks like 2 or 3 yards, but he might call out 6 yards. So now it's 2nd and 4, or maybe it's an 8-yard run, but he's going to call out 3rd and 7. So you just to keep some of that unpredictability to it. And that way you have to react to that aspect, just like in a real game. So I think that to me was interesting. And there was a lot of times, like one time he called out, it's winning time. He likes to work on winning time moments, as he pointed out before practice. And you guys know how many 1-score games there were, and they were 9-4 in 1-score games. Those winning time moments matter. Now, I would say if you're better in some other areas, you don't need as many of those 1-score outcomes, but the NFL is going to always have a lot of those. And he called it one time on the mic, he called out Mamba time. So there's a few big time Kobe Bryant fans, but they use Mamba time. Like when he called that out, he said, like, okay, defense, you're up 9 and it's in the 4th quarter. So how do you then play? Like, what do you then call? And if you're a corner, if you're a defensive player, you then have to react to the situation as far as how you cover, how you handle your job. Like, so for example, if you're a corner, are you going to gamble on something, or are you going to make sure you're not giving up a long route in favor of giving up maybe a 12-yard or 10-yard route as opposed to a 30-yard route, and now you're getting, a quick score. Those are the things they worked on. They worked on onside kicks. They worked on taking a knee deep in their own territory, like just how you go about that. Hail Marys from different areas, 2-point conversion from the 1-yard line, right? A fire drill goal, fire drill for field goals, fire drill for field goals. How's that? I'm going to get that out eventually. But they did all of that. And so like one time there was, again, 16 seconds on the clock, no timeouts. How do you handle? And you would shift in personnel. And so it was really an interesting watch. And I think, so that was the big thing today. Now, I'm not going to go over a lot of play-by-play from all this. I was more interested in the personnel settings and who was being placed where, because I think that will tell a lot about like what to expect. 3rd preseason game, starters aren't going to play, but 3rd preseason game. And then for the final cuts, because there's a handful of roster spots up for grabs. And I'll get into that more and other ones more about those spots. But so let's go over a couple now. Like special teams, I saw Duke Riley out there in first kick coverage. I think they want to see more of what he can do. So I don't know that he's going to earn a roster spot, but he was a guy that was on the street a week ago, right? So you can get by, but I think they want to see how he can help you. And he's a guy that you could put on the practice squad and keep around, but you want to make sure that you can do that. I saw undrafted rookie Ali Cahoe on the 2nd team for special teams on kick coverage. Same with Carlin Vigors. Same with cornerback Hamilton. Like, he's a guy that's also definitely on the radar too. But will they do enough to make the roster, or just more like, okay, are they not just worth keeping around, but in what capacity, what can they do? But I think all those guys warrant consideration if they want to keep someone extra, or more likely just strengthen their standing for a practice squad spot. So on the offensive line, we saw Laramie Tunsil and Brandon Coleman were working on the left side again, and then Nick Allegretti and then Andrew Wiley on the right side. But what he had is Josh Connolly and Chris Paul were behind the line. So just like yesterday when they were in the walkthrough, but this time in 11-11, they would rotate in after 3 or 4 plays. They would go into the starters, and Paul would be at left guard, Connolly, of course, at right tackle. And I do think like they seem pretty happy with how Connolly is adjusting and how he's performing and improving. And I think they also feel really good about Chris Paul. And it's funny because I talked to somebody who had been here before, and like they always raved about Paul's strength. And the defensive lineman, you'd hear them say, like, the dude is strong. It was always about, and he's not a bad athlete. He just had to lose some weight. And he certainly did that. And he's looked pretty good. And like Dan Quinn talked about his versatility. By that, I mean, he's not just power. Now he can move a little bit. So that he's definitely somebody to watch not just for a roster spot but will he get some sort of playing time at all? So saw Eddie Goldman was in there at the one with the ones at times as a nose tackle, not all the time, but definitely at times. And yeah, I bring him up because I just wonder what they're going to do with that. I do believe they'll keep 10 defensive linemen. The question is who? And I think there's a lot of guys that you could figure out, but Goldman does not have a lot of money in that guaranteed contract. I thought he did a better job in the second preseason game than the first. But the fact that they're working him out there with the ones, always a good sign for him. Not always a definitive sign, but always a good sign for sure. And I think like some guys that I would be watching for that. I know they like Cleveland Farrell, but has he done enough to warrant over a Jalen Holmes or some other guys at the other end of the roster? But we'll see. I'll get into more of that in a couple of days. One thing that Dan Quinn talked about before practice was how he felt like receiver Jalen Lane was ascending. And I think they're starting to really see him play at a certain speed. And he had a good preseason outing the other night. And I think like one thing they did is they worked him a lot on the outside because they want to see it. They worked Luke McCaffrey on the outside as well, want to see how do they handle a different role or a different spot because both guys are better situated for the slot. But how do they handle out there? And you saw Lane caught 2 of his 3 passes were on the outside. And today he caught another one on the outside. And I think it's funny because it was in one of those situational drills where it was like defense up 9 and late in the fourth quarter. So he's going up against Trey Amos and he did a really nice job. Now, maybe like if you're Amos, you don't want to get beat deep on this play, right? But what I really liked what Lane did is, first of all, and when you talk to the coach, like they feel like he's getting a much better release and that he's really kind of threatening vertically, right? So it's pressing the leverage, it's, and really being a threat. And I thought he was on this play, did all that, gets off the line well, and then threatens vertically, and he drives Amos off, comes back for the ball, good throw, good catch, boom, move the chains. But it was those elements, and you saw that in the game the other night. Like he's starting to show that more. I don't know what that means for the regular season. But I do think that he is, as Dan Quinn said, that he is ascending and going certainly in the right direction for sure. I saw Jordan McGee was out there today. So it's the first time we've seen him in 11-11 a little bit. Saw him covering Jeremy McNichols in one red zone play, did a nice job on this play, good leverage underneath, and knew where his help was on the play. So he took him completely out of the route. A good showing by McGee. It's the only play that I really focused so that hard on him, but it was a good job for sure there. And it's one play, so you don't extrapolate and take one play and see what it all means, right? But that play, he did a nice job. And that's something that they want to see from that spot is the coverage ability. And like I said, I do think that they want to see what does Cajo and then Duke Riley, what do they do? Because I think there's a lot. I think they have some good spots there for sure. I think those two are interesting because of special teams too. They both play a lot of special teams. All right, Jaden Daniels, a couple dimes today, a couple of really nice dimes to Deebo Samuel. First one in a deep cross, you got safety over the top. It's Quan Martin. You got corner trailing, and that's Mikey Samuel still. Wasn't bad coverage, just on the play, Daniels has to step up in the pocket and just boom, flick of the wrist, just boom, flick of the wrist, and a perfect ball to Deebo right in his basket, right? I mean, it was just, if you're shooting a ball from 3/4 court, it's a swish. Like that's the dime it was, right? So just a really nice job, an effortless throw, but that's how Daniels is. It's that special arm talent. It's not always about being a howitzer or having this cannon. It's about, flick of the wrist, quickness, etc. And it just really good job there. Later in the practice, he had another one to Deebo in the corner of the end zone, covered by the same two, not really open. I don't even, when he threw the ball, I was like, well, he's got no chance. It was kind of at the end zone I was standing at, thought he had no chance. He dropped it in there too. Again, now, ball was dropped that time, but it was really good coverage and it was a really good ball. So, and like I said, this was the last practice open to the media, but there was one of the things too which I always like, I enjoy watching practice. I think because I like doing these reports. I think you guys I learn something, so I try to pass it along to you. So I do always kind of miss them, but I will be doing podcasts, obviously multiple days a week, probably 4 to 5 during the season, during the week. probably, I think it's 5. So anyways, you'll get your fill. I'll get my fill, but I do like watching these practices because you get a lot of information out of them and a lot of, you see things like just even watching guys like today, I'm watching Debo Samuel work over here with Bobby Ingram on some route running and just planning and going. Then I'm watching some of the defensive backs coaches talking to Sam Still and Marshawn Lattimore and just watch what they're getting, just like little details on their footwork and little drills just to reinforce certain things. Like that's all the stuff that I enjoy seeing. Anyways, so afterwards today, we did talk to a few players. Obviously, we talked to Zach Ertz. One of the things he talked about was how Will Harris, the safety, signed in the offseason, made him better. Harris may not be what Jeremy Chin was as far as run defender. We'll see. That was a good strength of Jeremy Chin's, but he is a better cover guy, and you saw that throughout camp. So I think like that was a nice little battle with Ertz and Will Harris. But I thought Ertz had a really good camp. You fantasy guys, I would take him. I would take him at some point. Maybe not high, but he's had another good camp. And then the other thing that Ertz talked about too was Jaden Daniels. Now he was the first guy last year who was like, this guy, I'm telling you, this guy is not going to be good. He is good. So now what we're talking to him about is like the maturity of Daniels, the humility that he has, and just the way he conducts himself. And even Ertz said, it's crazy to think he's only in his second year. All right, George Fant worked a lot with the twos at left tackle. Obviously, I'm not going to be surprised if he makes it. I pretty much think if you're signing that guy, you want to put him out there. The question is, what does this mean for other players? So it's hard. Like you could keep Fant, but if you keep Fant, you got Fant right now. You got Fant, Trent Scott, Andrew Wiley, Josh Connolly, Laramie Tunsil, all tackles. Like that's a lot of tackles to keep. Now the benefit for them is that Wiley and Scott can both play guard. Wiley's versatility has really jumped out this camp, and so I think that's a big help. Could that make somebody else expendable, that ability to play all those spots? That could like would they keep a 5th tackle, or do you need to keep 5 tackles because you do have other guys who can absolutely play it? So I think that's something to watch for Saturday's game, just how they how that line group plays, how Trent Scott plays. Now I will say like Scott plays a lot of those special teams, like the field goals, extra points, et cetera. Like he's on those teams. Not that you can't replace him, but that is something that he does for them right now, in addition to obviously being a backup. So, but I think that's just something to watch. And how many offensive linemen do they keep? Some of that depends on Sam Cosmi. How do they handle Cosmi at the start of the year, which would then determine maybe who else makes it. And then of course you have Michael Dieter. Do you keep a backup center strictly, or do you say, hey, Nick Allegretti is the backup center? But if something happens to something happens to the center in the game, Allegretti's got to move over, and then now you're changing 2 spots instead of 1. So sometimes teams don't want to do that, but we'll see. But that's something that they have to look at for sure. And so, I think the other thing when you look at that final game is there's always seemingly somebody who makes it in that final game. I was talking to Jeremy Reeves. He said, where's a spot for a young guy to make it in the secondary? Is like, hey, there's always a spot. And he pointed to himself, and he pointed at the last game a few years ago. Like he said, that's the reason why he made the final roster for the first time out of camp, was because of how he performed in the 3rd preseason game. So while, it's not the sexiest game because you're not watching starters, the stuff does matter. And it matters to those on the field because somebody could earn a spot just based off what they do in this game. If it's close, right? Could one of the linebackers, could Hamilton do enough to maybe get a 6th corner, be a 6th corner out there? You look at the receivers, you have, KJ Osborne. That's the guy right now, I put him on the roster kind of by default a little bit, but he's experienced and he can be a backup returner. But what if one of the other guys jumps out? What if Michael Gallup has a big game? Like, does it become necessary to keep him, or can you still slide him onto the practice squad? Considering he hasn't played for a year, you probably could, but I think those are all things to look at. But in the offensive line, a lot of these guys will be playing for spots elsewhere, but also practice squad spots. So guys like Foster Sorrell, Ja'Cory Brooks, all those guys will be, obviously Brooks is a receiver, but like all those guys will be playing for spots on the practice squad, or if nothing, maybe somewhere else, but if nothing else, in the practice squad. Anyways, so that's why the game matters. Last thing, I want to talk about the run game versatility. I know because of Brian Robinson, without him being here, I don't think they have to, like, if you start the season out, like Chris Rodriguez was the first back out there today. So if you were like, who's the guy's going to get 15 carries a game? Right now it would be Rodriguez. And then obviously Eckler serves in his role. I don't think you want to overuse Eckler because he can help you in many ways in that role. So if you wear him out, you're hurting yourself down the line. You don't need to do that. But I think the other thing is it's the personnel allows them to be more versatile. You have Deebo Samuel, you have Jaden Daniels as a part of that. He's going to definitely keep running the ball. And obviously Deebo, because of what he does, he threatens the edge. When he goes in motion on those jet sweeps, you have to honor that. And sometimes the only goal for this run game is cause a little bit of hesitation to create better blocking angles or just a little gap to shoot back through. That's what they want to do. But I also think, as I'm talking to somebody, like they have personnel that allows them to play maybe to get to different runs, some runs they used last year, but just maybe not as much because they didn't have the right personnel to do it more than like every 4 or 5 games. Well, now maybe you can do it every couple games, and it just adds to your arsenal of what you can do and accomplish. And I think it's also, like I said, the ability to use Daniels in, I think, in the run game, but also Deebo Samuel. That's a big one for me because you have to honor him on those jet sweeps. And if you don't, they're just going to hand it to him. And if you do, then you may slide. And they also have some plays that they're very good at marrying some of the concepts where, it may look like a weak side counter, but it's really, they run this little crunch play and they're coming back to play that Rodriguez had 40 yards on. You can run that from a different side and make it look like something else, which then causes linebackers to move or hesitation, whatever. So like that's all the stuff they have in their arsenal. I think the other thing here too, and the line blocking down the stretch last year in the run game was not good enough, period. But I think so far, I think it could be pretty good. But also, like, I love the tight end blocking with Bates and Sinnott. I think he can be a good blocker. And then I think the receivers have done a better job with that too. So you add it up, and I think this run game has a chance to be productive. Whether or not you have one guy getting over 1,000 yards, I think you're going to have a few guys being very productive, and that will definitely help. So, all right, folks. Anyway, that's it for me. I appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, I'll be back after the game on Saturday, 12 o'clock kickoff. We'll get you wrapped up, and that's going to be a lot about like just what some of that stuff means for final cuts. Anyway, folks, appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.